neither the indulgent nor the demanding are genuinely focused simply on the process of growth for their child, which is the child is going to build skills gradually, and they will be able to gradually master these kinds of challenges. And those skills can be guided by ideals. So the indulgent parent never even gets to that. So they don't even teach skills. The demanding parent will typically teach skills, but they don't teach ideals. Only the middle, where you have this optimal confidence, where the expectations are that the child will be able to grow by engaging challenges, and in the process will master skills informed by higher ideals. That is the sweet spot.
Before we get started, if you enjoy these episodes, you might want to check out more at optimwork.com. Our website offers unique content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond. We have an in-depth masterclass covering our entire theory of growth, daily recommendations for personalized advice, and a platform to help groups and organizations learn and practice optimal work together. You can get a free trial at optimwork.com. Now let's start the episode. Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Optimal Work podcast, joined by Dr. Kevin Majeres. Kevin, good to be back here with you again.
Hey, Sharif, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, Kevin, absolutely. And it's exciting to be now starting the third episode in our series on optimal parenting. And so obviously in our first episode, we gave the overview of these three elements of parenting. And then in the second episode, we zoomed in on connection. So maybe we could just start, Kevin, then with a brief recap before we go into this second essential element, which is confidence.
Yeah, so we talked last time about connection, which is particularly exercised if a child is misbehaving or in a meltdown. If there's some dynorphin-driven behavior, as we've been talking about, the best thing that parents can do is find a way to connect, to be warm, to be validating. And really that is starting with mindfulness instead of reframing. And that's the counterintuitive thing that maybe I didn't highlight enough, but the first move is not to be helping the child to reframe a challenge. The first move is to connect with them, which means mindfully be attending to them, to be making eye contact, to have the right, warm tone of voice, to validate, to be like tuned in enough that you can actually validate what's causing their pain at that moment. So that mindfulness is what actually, the bond that we have with others is like a habitual kind of attention dedicated to that person. So the bond is exercised mindfully. That then sets the stage for what we want to talk about today, which is probably the more counterintuitive part of the whole optimal parenting series, and that's confidence.
Yeah, and so maybe one thing is just to clarify what we mean by confidence. I mean, are we talking about a parent has to be super confident in their parenting abilities? I talk with a lot of young parents with young kids, and maybe they think, I don't know, I have no idea what I'm doing. How am I supposed to be confident? Is it like fake it or?
So what you're trying to give your child, the confidence you're trying to build actually in your child, it takes a special shape in your own expectations for your child's ability to grow and master challenges. So it's really your confidence in your child's ability to be adaptive and flexible and to grow and to learn to master challenges. So it has nothing to do with how confident you feel. If a parent were going around feeling super confident in themselves, they might not still be able to do this step at all. And if they feel really insecure, in their own parenting abilities, it still that doesn't hinder this step at all. In fact, that might even be a better case because it gets us thinking more deliberately about what expectations do I bring to my child? Am I just focused on getting the right behavior, which is really the right outcome? Or am I really focused on my child's growth, which is always going to mean like their skills and ideals? Just say in this too, I think I really like to follow the work of Albert Bandura. And his idea of self-efficacy is that it really is always challenge-focused to a specific challenge. And if you have self-efficacy, it means that you feel that you are now capable of successfully navigating the challenge step by step. And so people may not have that in general for parenting, but also Bandura had no interest in general self-efficacy. Like, do you just walk around feeling confident? It's more about being able to pinpoint what exactly is the challenge for me, like, for instance, for me as a parent. Well, then, as you learn to master that challenge by bringing certain skills to bear in it, skills are really central to self-efficacy, or what we call confidence. But I like self-efficacy because that is the most robust idea of confidence. But it's all about how confident are you of your ability to engage a challenge. But here, by extension then, how confident are you in your children's ability to be able to successfully master a challenge that they're currently facing? And that's why skills are so central.
Yeah. And talking about it in terms of skills reminds me a little bit of the coaching class and the approach to coaching and mentoring that we have, where when we talk about encouraging others to engage challenge, the first thing is being optimistic and then being uplifting. So you're helping them to identify maybe their failed strategies and why those strategies are the problem, not the person. And the person can always develop new skills, new strategies to engage these challenges well in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a skill if you can break it into a series of steps. That's what a skill is. It's just a series of steps that allow us, it really is then an ability that we've learned by way of mastering challenges. So you just learn how to handle it step by step. So you think of like my medical training, being able to draw blood on someone, for phlebotomy, so to be able to check labs. That whole process is it's just a series of steps. You put on the tourniquet, you sanitize the area, and so on. And once you know the steps, none of the steps are particularly hard, but you quickly learn to master it. And then it gets easier and easier and easier with repetition. So this is, mastery is also part of this idea, that now the skill has really become second nature. And then you can focus on the next skill.
So now in the third step then in mentoring of being encouraging is about inspiring the person with higher ideals. So I suppose that's going to play a role here as well.
That's right.
Skills and ideals.
Yeah. So skills are like the body and ideals are like the soul. They have to go together. So in the end, by teaching skills, that is setting the stage for teaching your children ideals. Now, children when they're very young don't really take well to abstract concepts, even like skills. But maybe very young children can still get a few of these skills and then ideals. They might get good at, when they're 2 or 3 years old, at putting things in the proper place. And even a very young child can get good at, wiping a table, for instance. So that maybe then they can start to pick up this idea of being tidy. And, talking with friends with kids, I've been told that tidy is the first ideal that really resonates with children. But children also learn to obey. They also learn to be polite, or, if they're in church, to be respectful. So I think that all along the way, you have particular skills, like in church, sitting quietly in the pew and reading your book if you have a book with you or whatever. Well, that's an example of a skill. But that is then how they really start to get the kind of the feel of the different ideals. And so skills are the body, ideals are the soul. And skills on their own, if we only focused on them, that wouldn't really be that enriching. Because once you've mastered a skill, they become kind of rote. That's why you need ideals to continually guide them. And the amount of dopamine you get, from mastering a skill diminishes over time. But with ideals, the more you practice them, the more dopamine you get, because they become progressively actually more motivating. And when we've talked in the past about dynorphins, just to make a quick note here, since I mentioned dopamine, once you get through the dynorphin dip, there's this dopamine bounce. And that means once the children have gotten through a meltdown or bad behavior or just a trouble spot, you can then, if you can be connected with them to get through it, you can harness the dopamine bounce into practicing some new skill. So that's why confidence comes second. There's this dip in the dynorphin territory, but then there's this bounce where dopamine goes way up. And that allows the child to master skills more readily, to remember them better, to be able to apply them better the next time. So once you've gotten right past a meltdown is an ideal moment to do skills training.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, maybe we could just do a quick note of when to connect, when to be confident, because comparing, for instance, these steps of connection, confidence, consistency, to the steps of the golden hour reframing mindfulness challenge. With the golden hour, it's like super clear. Okay, before I sit down to work, reframing mindfulness challenge, and then work. But here, you're not saying that in every interaction with your child, you just follow 3 steps: connect, have confidence, be consistent, or something. So I don't know. Can you just give a brief note on how these are meant to be applied in relation to one another?
What we want to do if if their behavior is slipping or if their emotions are slipping, that's when the parenting is most needed. And the first step always is connect. That's because connection will soothe the child, but also make them more flexible and receptive. So they will become more receptive as they experience the felt bond. If not, at least you have identified with the child what the main challenge is. So as long as their emotions are still all riled up, you're not going to be able to really get to the next step. So, but if the emotions aren't riled up, if you can be very warm and validating of what's hard, then you can help to see how open are they to see a new path forward. And that's what you're trying to help them to see is, where should we be focusing our efforts right now? What would be one small step we could take? I don't think parents have to be even like saying, well, here's a skill I'm going to teach you. But they might just think in their minds of what would be like getting beyond the bad behavior, which is hard to do in those moments. But if you can get beyond the bad behavior and see that lurking behind the bad behavior or the meltdown is actually a missing skill. There is some skill deficit that's showing up in this way. Then you want to be helping them to think about what they could do different. What is some new way they could approach the problem that they're facing? So I think that the second step being, after connection is always going to be a positive direction. And that's what confidence is aimed at, helping them to engage a challenge constructively. So really it does come second always. The third, consistency, we'll get to, that is more the background tone that you're maintaining in the house. And so that is more maintained all the time. And so, the first 2 steps though of connect and then build, their confidence, show confidence in their ability to engage the challenge. That kind of shared confidence, that is always going to be the second one. Daniel Siegel talks about this. He always says connect and then redirect. But what I don't exactly like about redirect is that's not the same thing as this confidence step, because it could be too easily thinking of like manage the bad behavior. So first you connect and then you discipline. That's missing is this thing of what really is the growth hidden in the challenge. So that's why the second step is reframing. So, and then the reframing, you're not going to be teaching the child the concept reframing unless they're 16 years old. But the effect of it is essentially, how can this challenge bring out your best? What would be a new way of trying to take one step forward in this challenge?
And then, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and then it just came up of the redirection, that there might be a tendency to focus on the outcomes that you want, as opposed to what we just mentioned of skills and ideals. And I think that's a great segue into the 2 extremes of confidence on either end. When we talked about connection,
exactly,
we had the deficit, which is deficit enmeshment. Would you call that the deficit? And then the other extreme of being too detached. So now we're going to have two extremes as well. That our goal here is to chart the middle course, right?
Yeah. So if you're try to imagine an inverted U, or something like the Arch of St. Louis. So the peak is going to be optimal confidence, and that means that your expectations are that your child will grow progressively and be able to master challenges. And so that idea is confidence is all about your expectations for the child. But then if you go to the left nadir, that would be if a parent really gave no expectations for their child, had no expectations that their child could master challenges at all, and instead was more likely to quickly problem solve every challenge. And so the parent then just becomes the comforter, the problem solver. And that's the what I call it being indulgent. But the indulgent parent is actually focused on outcomes. But here the outcome is the emotional complacency of the child. Like, the child's emotions and desires are all fulfilled. So if that becomes the outcome you're going for, then you're going to become indulgent. On the other end, if you imagine what is it like if expectations are unrealistically high, right? And that's going to be the problem when parents become too demanding. And they also are focused on outcomes. They're going to be focused on, the perfect grades or getting into the perfect college. They're going to be focused on, how you're performing in this sport or in this instrument, how many, hours you put in practice today. And so parents can with all the best intentions, can get too focused on outcomes. And they're not really, neither the indulgent nor the demanding are genuinely focused simply on the process of growth for their child, which is the child is going to build skills gradually, and they will be able to gradually master these kinds of challenges. And those skills can be guided by ideals. So the indulgent parent never even gets to that. So they don't even teach skills. The demanding parent will typically teach skills, but they don't teach ideals. Only the middle, where you have this optimal confidence, where the expectations are that the child will be able to grow by engaging challenges, and in the process will master skills informed by higher ideals. That is the sweet spot. And so in the end, indulgent and demanding styles have a similar effect, that the children don't like engaging challenges. They don't want to engage challenges. Challenges are seen in some way as negative, either through they're daunting because they've never done it, or they're so afraid of making mistakes that they don't want to have to do it. But with the growth mindset, you're actually able, this middle ground, which really is about growth mindset. The children can come to love engaging challenges as a way of acquiring new mastery. Children are designed to master things quickly, and they love mastering things. All the dopamine is designed to help them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great, Kevin. Maybe now we could go into some real life scenarios looking at skills and ideals in action. So just how this might actually work out in practice. So, I'll give you scenario one is a child having, a little bit of a temper after losing a board game.
Okay.
What would you think, getting angry about that? What would you think is the skill?
Yeah, this just happened to me the other night. Yeah. And so it was so unfair.
What was the skill you were working on in that moment?
Yeah, playing Citadel and everyone teamed up against me. It was so unfair. So you can think of, maybe, one of the common kind of parenting kind of problems, I think, is that in these moments, say a child is melting down after losing, they might be focused mostly on stopping the meltdown. And so the parent outcome that's most desired could be that the kids not be arguing right now. And while that's understandable, that doesn't really show a path forward. Even if you can pacify the child in some way, which risks also being too indulgent, even if you can, you're not necessarily going to make it easier for them the next time. There has to be a way the child approaches losing that will get easier with practice. That's the key. So I would say congratulating the winner. Maybe even more generally, telling the winner what you thought they did really well in that game. If there was something really skillful. Now, some of these games are just luck, but if there was something skillful, then to point out the skill and say and to appreciate it. You want skills to be able to be practiced frequently. A good goal is specific, positive, and frequent. And
Mhm.
so the idea of like catching what other people are doing really well in sports or games or music or whatever in class, that's a great thing that can be practiced in more situations than simply losing a board game. Because losing a board game might not be easy to get traction because it doesn't happen enough. It doesn't happen, unless they're really losing every single night. Um, so I think that the idea that look for a way that this can be practiced more generally.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it might take a couple tries, whereas if you just go for the outcome, okay, stop, go to your room, then you might get the outcome you want pretty quickly, but you don't get the growth. But if you can come up with a skill or an ideal, it's like you can get to deeper growth, and then you'll be impressed how much they're growing in many more areas of their life as well.
Exactly. That getting, it's not about managing chaos. There is going to be chaos. There is always going to be disorder. The goal is to be making sure that you're making the most of opportunities as they arise, to help particular children learn hard lessons. And the hard lesson here is the particular skill that they can practice at that moment. Now, if they're like in the middle of meltdown, they might not be in that, but you can probably get them away and bond with them a bit, and then help them to see that, in fact, if you can help them to see, if they're old enough, to understand why this is really what it means to be kind or to be generous, and then if they can see that there's something deeper here, it's not just a family rule, it's actually an ideal that we really believe in and that we really want to be living. So the more you have those kinds of things in your child's life, ideals, that are meaningful to them, the easier it is to then speak the language of ideals.
Yeah. That's great. Well, the next scenario I'd like to give you is, a child who's frustrated when doing his homework. And let me just add a little bit of difficulty to this because this question arose when you were talking, which is, suppose you have a couple kids all doing their homework together, after school or something. And one kid gets frustrated, and then so he's not focused on his schoolwork, and maybe he's distracting the others a little bit. So to me, then that would lead a parent to be a little bit more focused on the outcome. Well, he's distracting his sister and she can't focus now either. So you kind of just want the outcome. So how do you stay skills focused in that case? And then also, what would be the skill then that you would focus on with the kid who's frustrated with homework?
It might be that in a particular moment that there does need to be discipline. And we'll talk about consistency and discipline next time. So that the idea, there are ways of helping to curb bad behavior. But when children are misbehaving, if you focus on the missing skill, you're going to be focusing on encouraging the best good behavior you can. And those skills are going to always be relevant to the children. They'll see how, okay, here's a challenge. If you can help them to talk through the challenge, like what was the hard thing here in doing the homework? So sometimes one way of getting through an impasse in doing homework is breaking it into a series of smaller steps, right? So maybe that's something you have to pull the child aside to work on. Okay, show me where you are right now and let's think through this. And then you might have a certain way where you teach them, okay, first try breaking it into smaller steps. If that doesn't work, then you might think about like they can put into words what is the problem. Just articulating the impasse can oftentimes help. If they could formulate questions in their mind, that can help them get past. Sometimes just setting it aside and moving on so you can come back to it later. That's a wonderful skill to develop. You reach an impasse, you work on it for 5 minutes, and then you just set it aside. Go to the next things, and then eventually you can come back and maybe it makes sense then. That's actually using the reentry benefit, which is one of the ways of getting your default attention to work for you. You have to learn to put problems on a shelf in your mind and come back to them. But even kids that are young, if they reach an impasse in doing their homework, they can do that. So in all these things, even like learning how to consult a reference, but you want to be helping your child to learn how to get through an impasse in studies. And those things that I just said, that works if you're having an impasse writing your dissertation for your PhD, or if the impasse is in second grade math. So there are general ways getting through an impasse. And probably, I just come up with those. Probably parents can come up with many other similar skills. And then you look for other ways they can be practicing that. So not just when they're at the impasse, but maybe it's a good habit to break things down into smaller steps every time they can.
Right. That's in fact the most, it's like the most general skill. Every skill that you could ever build is guided by that whole process of breaking things down into smaller steps.
Yeah. And that's actually the ideal of order. The essence of order is breaking things into steps. And so that's what we're teaching a child is order. Now you might not again be able to tell him or her that this is the essence of order from the inside.
Right. Right.
But that is true. And by living these things, by living these skills with the right spirit, they're already living the ideals.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, Kevin, last we have 2 more scenarios. So scenario 3 is a child who resists trying new foods.
Yeah. This is such a crucial thing. I think that picky eating is something that parents need to never accommodate. So there has to be this rule, and this gets into the our next episode on consistency, which a big theme in consistency is no accommodation. So there are skills that parents have to master, and there are skills that the kids have to master. But in the kids, it's being able to, I think, try new foods. Being able to, in each meal, be stretching themselves a bit. Maybe here is actually the ideals that kind of speak more. If the kids could see that they have to be patient with the process of coming to like certain foods. The idea that there's an acquired taste. So getting good at acquiring new tastes. Maybe that's a skill, but maybe it's part of patience as an ideal. That you just have to be patient with the process. And even if you don't like them, your body likes these foods, your brain likes these foods. You need these foods. You like sleeping, you like, not being emotional, you like being able to pay attention in school. These foods are what let you do that, assuming the parents are trying to serve their children nutritious whole foods.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Good. Well, okay, Kevin, the last scenario, this is actually from a listener, but what to do, what skills and ideals can we be providing to children who get bored easily or frequently?
This is, I used to cry. I was so bored. So in the summers, I loved being in school actually, and I loved learning. And when it would be in August, like, in the middle, right before school is going to start, and I'd just be, so there's nothing to do. And I think that it was really good for me actually. So it turned me into a reader at a young age. And so that actually that helped a lot. So boredom, it'd be great for us to have another episode just on boredom. It's what happens when tasks are repetitive or meaningless. It's a sign of being on a plateau. So boredom actually is just a sign that you're not developing new skills. It's even more deeply. Boredom comes if you've overmastered a skill and you're not optimizing it. Well, that might be because ideals are not connected. And when ideals are connected to skills, we continually are optimizing. And so the skills never get old. They're always developing. They're always expanding. So boredom is a disconnection of both skills and ideals. But you could think of are there particular skills then that the child who is bored can be practicing? I think it's so important that the parents not swoop in to entertain the kids. The goal here is not to solve boredom as if it's a problem. Boredom is, it's a dynorphin dominant state. But children, if you can be compassionate with their boredom, connect in the middle of it, then maybe you can help them think of particular skills they could get better at. Maybe they could be planning their own activities. And that kind of planning is a skill. Maybe they could be good at brainstorming ideas. Maybe they could be identifying friends that they could call up or hang out with or do something with. Maybe they could, maybe the boredom could be what instigates them to be reading books if they're old enough, or to be learning certain sports, playing outside and playing, learning how to kick the soccer ball. Like there are things that they could be getting better at. Instruments, or drawing. Maybe they could be learning how to volunteer more around the house. And so, but the ideal really, in some way, is love of learning. So love of learning is the solution to boredom, because it gets you wanting to practice new skills and to be developing, to be, expanding your knowledge and your know-how. So to me, I think boredom is, children need to be bored to develop the love of learning fully. And if they're always entertained and they have screens and they're never bored, then they won't develop the love of learning as far as I can see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when kids are bored, I don't know if this is exactly an ideal, but it's like to help them. It's a good opportunity that now they can take the initiative to do good things. And it's not like they were assigned a good thing to do and then they did it, but now they have this real opportunity to grow in like a love for learning, but a love for really any good friendship that they can just take the initiative and do on their own.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Because all of these things I mentioned, like, taking the initiative to call a friend or to reach out, taking initiative to make a plan for themselves, brainstorming and with the instruments and volunteering, all of that is exactly what you just said, is learning how to take the initiative and not just to be passive. And that is, so I would rejoice when kids are bored, because that is where so much deep learning can be done. And then they can, once they get into the new activity, they can get this dopamine bounce, which is the whole confidence step is about investing the dopamine bounce in more lasting growth. So if you can be compassionate with the boredom, you get through the dynorphin dip, but then you get into the dopamine bounce that they invest in the new activity.
That's great. Yeah, Kevin, we're basically out of time here, but I don't know if you can just maybe give us one one practical, actionable takeaway, something parents can do this week to start building real confidence in their child or children.
Yeah. And I think this is along the lines of what it means to help children reframe. And it's not teaching them reframing. It's not when they're in pain saying, "Oh, offer it up," or like, "This is going to make you stronger," because reframing instead of connecting will come across as dismissive. Instead, you first connect with the pain if it's there. You at least validate it briefly with a kind of that you normalize it, but then you help them to be thinking through in your mind. It's not about the behavior. It's not about the meltdown. It's not about the fact that they're bored. Really, it's about the missing skill. And that is the opportunity you have to teach them. So whenever issues arise with a child, say in this coming week, it's good to try to see if you can look beyond the immediate behavior and trying to solve that if it's a problem, and instead see the missing skill. Think about what could my child learn to practice that would make this easier for them? You can think about how you would deliberately teach them that skill step by step to help work with them, talk it through with them if they're ready for that. And then even help them to look forward to their next opportunity to practice it. That would be a very profound reframe that you've now worked the child through. And then we'll see in the next week, actually, that leads to the next step, which is challenge, maintaining a consistent tone of challenge in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think maybe it goes without saying, but these are also good things for a parent to be practicing with, his or her child, but also for parents to discuss this together, when they're having a conversation about a child, what skill do you think Timmy could grow in, as opposed to just what does Timmy need to do,
Exactly. The skills focus is what does the work of the reframe for the child, but it also is what ensures the child would be developing a growth mindset. So that they're going to be thinking, it's not just, I hate these things, I hate these foods, this kind of thing bores me, but they actually learn how to shape themselves. So it's a lifelong process, but that's the task of the parent.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, now we're really out of time. So thanks so much, Kevin, and we'll be back next week to discuss consistency.
See you then.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and you're looking for more in-depth guidance, check out optimalwork.com. Our unique platform that delivers content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond.